It's very easy to follow the path of anger, frustration. It's tied to the ego, which is very natural. The idea that our way is the only correct way. Our belief is the only correct belief. Our personhood is always right. It takes a lot more discernment, a lot more subtlety, and a lot more lack of comfort and safety to be fair to everyone else and yourself, to entertain other ideas or view any kind of belief system as just one of many, or any kind of one way of being as just one of many. That's much more difficult. It's not as safe. It's much more comfortable to believe there is one right way and everything else is wrong. Very binary way to look at things. The path of anger it's poisonous. If you're fueled by the poison, expect to be poisoned by it. It doesn't just burn off. The body, it doesn't want to hold anger. It doesn't want to hold frustration. In fact, anger increases cell degeneration. It makes the body not last as long. It uses up the body like a caustic fuel. I, for many years, followed the path of anger and the path of pleasure as well. I was willing to do many things other people were not. Fights, broken noses, concussions, facial fractures, all because I was insecure. All because I wanted to be on top. I wanted to be the one left in a room in the path of pleasure, trying to get drugs or alcohol or sex and just more. It uses up the body. And the emotions tied to these things, it also uses up the emotions. Where there was anger or passion, soon you'll find that there is a kind of a void, an empty space, and you just try to fill it more and more. With more aggression, more violence, more pleasure, fill it more and more. And you find that your emotions, they're forced into a kind of catatonic state where you are this empty vessel being burned up slowly until there's just a thin bit of you left on the outside of where you're shoving all this fuel into this growing black hole. Anger, it's not even sustainable on a human level for very long, on an emotional level. Because think about it, when you get angry, what happens? You get angry, and then right afterwards, there's this lull, this lack of energy. All your energy was in this brilliant burst in your brain, in your mind, in yourself. And then after that burst, there's not as much fuel, and you feel an absence, a lack, a void, a black hole. And if you try to sustain this, you can't your entire life. You'll find that people who are very angry, who are furious all the time, they get older quicker, or they're unhealthy physically. And the ones who can sustain it, the very few, they end up having some kind of either weird karma that allows them to sustain it for now, or they have some other kind of virtue or discipline that they apply that kind of balances out the degeneration of the system in the mind that anger causes. I think of Star Wars and the Jedi and Sith when I think of the path of anger and the path of peace. So the first line of the Sith code is, peace is a lie, there is only passion. The first line of the Jedi code is, there is no emotion, there is peace. Two very opposites, they're very extreme opposites. Now think about it, is peace a lie? Is there only passion? Of course not. And is there only peace and no emotion? Of course not. But these both are assertions. They're mantras. They're meant to bring about that state of being within yourself rather than an applicable statement to all that exists. When you say peace is a lie, there's only passion, that kind of leads one down the path of anger and trying to sustain that ferocity, that inner ferocity. And when you say there is no emotion, there's peace, you are making yourself more subtle, more attuned to the finer points of your inner self, the more naturally compassionate and naturally balanced part of yourself, and bringing that into the forefront and making that more powerful, more present in your awareness and in your being. I think that when we're thinking about the path of anger versus the path of peace, it's very important to understand that you can still stick up for yourself or fight for what you believe in without being fueled by anger. And you can still feel angry sometimes. But in ideology and emotion and in thought and even in communication, it's best to seek that balance, that peace, that even line, rather than embracing the bits of fuel that flare. Think of anger maybe not as something to be suppressed so that you can achieve peace, but something that is an anomaly to a state of being that you would otherwise be if there weren't some kind of internal and external conflict. This internal and external conflict can be resolved, and the best medicine for anger is delay. I think it goes that way. It's an old Stoic saying. I think that's how it's said. But you'll find that if you delay and you think about something, then that anger, it was an anomaly. It wasn't you as you usually are. There's paths of anger in the occult and magical worlds. There are beings, kind of going off on a tangent here, but that's what this channel is. There are beings who cannot manifest as human beings because they are too chaotic, too angry. The human body is, in order for it to exist, it has to be at a state of order. For all these things, all these mechanisms to work together and to work as well as they do, to be a human being, there has to be a certain level of order and a large amount of balance, large amount of peace. So one could say we are naturally peace. But there are beings who cannot form a human body around themselves because they cannot achieve that balance. But even if you don't believe in supernatural beings or anything like that, look at examples in the natural world or in the human world of what I'm talking about. There are people who cannot sustain a long, in-depth conversation, or cannot sustain their focus or an equal back and forth with somebody else without their ego trying to be forceful to where they are the dominant one, or their points are better, or they don't care about the other person, or something like that. Just something basic like that in communication. There's people who can't sustain those because they're very much self-centered, and they are way more in the path of anger because it's the path of ego as well. But not being able to sustain deeper ideas, deeper understanding, it denotes a large degree of agitation of some sort. Sometimes it's not anger, sometimes it's mental inability to focus, and you've got so many thoughts, but anger operates in a very similar way, and it manifests in a very similar way. And a tiger or a lion, they spend a short amount of time hunting and ripping apart their prey and eating it compared to the time that they take to digest. Little flashes, little anomalous bits of activity before the overall activity they take up is digestion and rest. There are some people who they are very lethargic as well, very tamasic, very not just subdued, but just no activity. But then the only thing that brings them to activity is, some kind of passion or anger or seeking to get something or seeking after this emotion. It's a very unfortunate state to be in. But that's how anger will leave you eventually, is that the lethargy will grow, and the bits of anger, those will kind of be all that's there, and there'll be fewer and fewer until you're kind of a husk. Now, it doesn't go that extreme for most people who follow the path of anger, whether they know it or not. It's not usually that extreme, but that's where it always leads. And usually most people are kind of in between the path of anger and the path of peace, and they don't really think of it that way. But it's good to contemplate what peace and anger is for you, and how you follow one or the other, or how you want to follow one or the other. Anger and frustration and extreme emotions, very, very sexy, very drawing. They excite us. So sometimes our mind wants to follow that. But becoming a more subtle person, as I have become a much more subtle person, a much more subdued person, I've come to understand myself and realize things and be able to even create things in a way I never could when I was following the path of anger and pleasure, frustration. I began to understand myself and to be able to use myself as a tool rather than being used by the fuel that fueled me, that drove me. Most people's lives are maybe not as extreme as some points in my life, but I've found that the path of peace and the path of subtlety is actually way more appetizing, and way more healthy and way more enjoyable. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about the path of anger versus the path of peace. I hope that there's some things in here that you found interesting, useful. Feel free to like this video, it really helps out the channel. Feel free to leave a comment, that also helps the channel. It's kind of funny that I did this video after lifting weights, but I found that lifting weights actually leaves me in a greater state of peace. It's directing, it's kind of working out that frustration or that anger. Even if you're not angry, you're working out those issues, those tensities. Is that a word? This tenseness in the body in a very healthy way. And sometimes you can channel anger or frustration or emotion into a number of different healthy activities. But yeah, feel free to share this wherever you like. Leave a comment. I try to get to all comments. That also helps out the channel. I hope you all like this. I hope this is useful. And most importantly, I hope that all of you have a wonderful day.